Hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about how verbs in German are conjugated. Now even though German is related to English, it still has very different grammar. So native English speakers learning German may have some trouble with some of the concepts. However, most verbs in German follow a pretty simple pattern, and with a little bit of practice, you shouldn't have any trouble learning them. Now German is actually my second language. I lived in Germany for 4 years and I studied it for 5, so I feel like I'm pretty qualified to talk about this. However, my German isn't perfect, so if you notice any mistakes, please correct me down in the comments. For present tense verbs, there's a pretty simple pattern that most verbs follow. First, you take the infinitive verb and you remove the en ending. For this example, we're going to be using the verb machen, which means to do or to make. So we take off the en ending and we get mach. Then we add the ending that corresponds with the person. Ich mache, du machst, macht, wir machen, ihr macht, and sie machen. Here are some example sentences. Ich mache meine Hausaufgabe. Macht Kaffee nicht gern. Warum machst du nie Abendessen? Machen is an example of a strong verb, which means that it follows the pattern rigidly. However, German also has weak verbs, which mess with the pattern. For these ones, you may just need to memorize the forms. For example, sein means to be. This is by far the most irregular German verb, but it's also the most important, so you definitely need to memorize all of these. The forms of this verb are ich bin, du bist, ist, wir sind, ihr seid, und sie sind. Here are some examples. Ich bin ein Amerikaner. Du bist sehr witzig. Meine Mutter ist ein Tierärztin. Sein is a pretty extreme example of a weak verb. Most weak verbs will still follow the pattern to some degree, but there's a lot of memorization you need to do. Now we're going to discuss the past tense. For strong verbs, this is relatively simple. All you do is put a T after the root verb and then add the verb ending. One minor difference is that the first person singular and the third person singular are typically the same when it comes to past tense. So for example, sagen means to say, and its conjugation in the past tense is ich sagte, du sagtest, sagte, wir sagten, ihr sagtet, und sie sagten. However, some verbs can be a little bit complicated when it comes to past tense. For instance, a lot of them will undergo vowel mutation, so basically the vowel and the root of the verb will change. Unfortunately for learners of German, there are a lot of verbs that do this, like ich sah, ich aß, ich hätte, ich lief, ich trank, und ich flog. However, you'll notice that a lot of these verbs are also conjugated irregularly in English, and this is partially because of how German is related to English distantly. It'll take some memorization, but you'll eventually get it. Let's see some examples of weak verbs in action. Ich sah ein rotes Vogel. Ich lief 2 Kilometer gestern. Ich aß 2 Brötchen zum Abendessen. The future tense is probably the easiest to remember. All you have to do is conjugate the verb werden, and then add the infinitive form of the next verb at the end of the sentence. Here's some quick examples. Ich werde den Test bestehen. Wir werden seinen Monat klauen. The last verb tense we're going to be talking about today is the past perfect tense. The perfect tense represents something that you did sometime in the past, whether it be a week ago or years ago, while preterite's used more for recent events. It's basically the same in English, like I did versus I have done. I did is in the preterite form, while I have done is in the perfect form. The first step is pretty simple. Just conjugate the word haben, which means to have, in the present tense. So we get ich habe, du hast, hat, wir haben, ihr habt, und sie haben. The next step is a little harder. You have to add the past participle to the end of the sentence. In this form, the verb will typically have a ge at the beginning, and then the rest of the root will be changed quite dramatically, although sometimes it will not be. So sagen becomes gesagt, essen becomes gegessen, sehen becomes gesehen, schwimmen becomes geschwommen, and trinken becomes getrunken. This verb form is probably the hardest for new German speakers, but with a little bit of practice and a lot of memorization, it shouldn't be too much of a hassle. Like the last few times, let's go over some examples. Ich habe keine Mathematik gelernt. Hast du deine Hausaufgabe gemacht? Hat nicht mit meinem Freund gesprochen. This is far from all the verb forms that German has. There's quite a few others, but these are the basic ones that you need for basic conversational German. Maybe in the future I'll go further in depth, but for now I think this should suffice. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.